All right, good evening, everyone. Let us begin. So we're going to do something a little bit different this evening, Emir Hashem, that I know last week we started Kapitel Lamed, Mizmor Shiur Chanukah Sabayis LeDavid, and I promised you a tie-in to Chanukah, but Emir Hashem, we're actually going to just go full into Chanukah, Emir Hashem, this year, in preparation, Emir Hashem, for Yom Tiv, and I'll speak about the schedule in the coming weeks, but we'll continue with Kapitel Lamed Emir Hashem when we restart actual Sefer Tehillim. So I want to draw your attention tonight. First of all, our Shiur tonight is dedicated by the Engelsberg, Dinovitzer, and Steinberg families. Le'iloi Nishmas Harad Yitzchok, Dovid Ben Meir, Aryeh Zichron Livracha. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, the Neshama will have an Aliyah and the families in a Chama. So I want to share with you something really incredible. We'll start with a little bit of halacha, and then, in general, it's just an important introduction. Often we misunderstand the role of halacha in Yiddishkeit. So we often assume that the role of halacha is to tell us what to do and what not to do. Now, of course, that's absolutely unequivocally correct. Halacha teaches us how to live our lives. But the incredible part of halacha is that embedded within the legal technicalities are the incredible hashkafas of Judaism as well. So when Chazal codified halacha, halacha is the way that we also learn the moral, ethical implications of anything and everything within Judaism. And this is incredibly important. In the world of learning, they say when you learn halacha, you can learn halacha yevesha. So halacha yevesha means dry halacha. And dry halacha is do this, don't do that, this is kosher, this is treif, this is tameh, this is tar, which is important. But when you begin to go ahead and look beneath the surface, you begin to see that Chazal taught us so many incredible lessons embedded within the halacha. So I want to show you an example of that tonight. Take a look at the Rambam. So the Rambam number 1 says as follows: Mitzvahs ner Chanukah, mitzvah chaviva hi ad ma'od. The mitzvah of ner Chanukah is a very special mitzvah. V'tzarich adam lehizar ba kedei lehodia hanes. Ulahosif b'shevach hakel v'hodaya lo alanisim sha'asalanu. And the Rambam's wording over here is very beautiful. And a person has to be very careful with the mitzvah of Ner Chanukah in order to go ahead and publicize the miracle and to praise HaKadosh Baruch Hu for all of the miracles that He has done for us. Now, what I want to point out to you is something really incredible because there's something magnificent already embedded in this Rambam. You see, we often think that the mitzvah, how do you fulfill the mitzvah? How do you fulfill the mitzvah of Chanukah? How do you fulfill the mitzvah of Ner Chanukah? What do you have to do? You light the menorah. Anything else? Right? Eat latkes, right? Good, that's a famous one. Right? Latkes, donuts, depending on how from you are. Good, both, if you're very from. Ala nisim, right? There's a concept of halal v'hodah. But here's what's fascinating. If you look at the Rambam, look how the Rambam describes the mitzvah of Ner Chanukah. He says a person has to be very careful with the mitzvah of Ner Chanukah, kedei lahodia hanes, to publicize the miracle, ulahosif b'shevach hakel v'hodaya lo al hanisim sha'asa lanu, and to thank Hashem for the miracles that He has performed for us. Now, what's unique about the wording of the Rambam? Miracles, plural. If you were writing this, how would you write it? Miracle, singular. What miracle are we talking about? The miracle of Chanukah. Even though Chanukah itself has multiple miracles. Remember, again, there's the military victory, there's the rededication of the Beis HaMikdash, there is the Pach Shem and the cruse of oil that remain lit. But what the Rambam is saying is something absolutely amazing. Do you think the whole point of Chanukah is just to kindle a menorah every night and that's it? First of all, even just think about this on a basic level. Chanukah is not the best miracle we've had. Right? We are a people of miracles. And the truth is, if you think about Chanukah doesn't even rank in the top 10. I mean, is it incredible that a little thing of oil will remain lit for 8 days? Sure, it's very neat, right? Definitely, very interesting. Is it like the most incredible miracle? I don't know. HaKadosh Baruch Hu sustained us with man. 3.5 million people got divine room service each and every day, right? You got man each and every day. Every man, woman, and child. There was a rock that provided us with water in the zechus of Miriam. There were clouds. Now the truth is we have Yomim Tovim and different things commemorate these things. But the fact that, remember the Gemara says, the fact that oil burns altogether is something miraculous, right? We take it for granted that you take oil, you put a wick in there, you light it, and it burns. Why? Because Kadosh Baruch Hu said it should be that way. So the same God who says that oil burned decided this time that oil should burn for 8 days. What the Rambam is saying is something so incredibly amazing. Chanukah is a springboard to become appreciative of the miracles of everyday life. You see, Chanukah is a unique time. Why? Because what's the challenge of Chanukah? Let's be honest, right? What's the challenge of Chanukah? The challenge of Chanukah is the fact that you pretty much maintain your activities of daily living, right? In other words, I'm going to work, I'm doing my thing, I come home, I light candles, it's very nice. But the truth is, like, from a Yom Tov perspective, it's very hard. In fact, I would think very often one of the challenges of Chanukah is you light the menorah, and as much as you would like to perhaps bask in the light for hours upon hours on end, there are other tasks that need to be dealt with. Chanukah is not a fully immersive spiritual experience, but that's exactly the point. The whole point of Chanukah is to open our eyes to the miracles which are all around us every single day. And the goal is to see the miracles in mundane, ordinary life. You know, to see the miracles on Shabbos, to see the miracles on Yom Tov, that's great, but that's much easier. We say in Modim every single day in Shemona Esrei, we thank Hashem, va'al misecha shebechol yom imanu. We thank Hashem for the miracles that He performs for us every single day. Do we take stock of those miracles? Do we ever stop for a moment to say, what miracles did HaKadosh Baruch Hu do for me today? Big miracles, small miracles, ordinary miracles, convenience miracles. They're all around us. It's just often we don't reflect on them. And the reason why this is such a terrible thing that we don't reflect on them is because we don't think about the daily miracles, our lives often become colored by our challenges. You see, I would invite you to try the following experiment. On any given day, take out a piece of paper, make 2 columns. Challenges, miracles. I'm not a betting man, but if I was, your miracles would always outweigh your challenges. Now, it doesn't mean the challenges go away, and it doesn't mean the challenges are negated by the miracles. The challenges of life, we've done enough of Sefer Tehillim to know the challenges of life are the challenges of life, right? And good things don't cancel out negative or challenging things. They all exist. But on any given day, life is filled with so many dramatic miracles and so many beautiful little events that often we don't even take stock of. Says the Rambam, that's Chanukah. Chanukah is not about the Pach Shemen. The Pach Shemen, the cruse of oil, the jug of oil, that is a springboard. See, everyone sees the miraculous nature of a little bit of oil remaining lit for 8 days. That's the springboard. That is quite literally to open my eyes, is to illuminate my vision, to be able to see the miracles of everyday life. That is the avoda of Chanukah. Every Yom Tov has an avoda. Chanukah is the Yom Tov of gratitude. It is the Yom Tov of miracles. How do you know if you had a good Chanukah? It's not about the gifts you get, right? How do you know you had a good Chanukah? If at the end of 8 days, you look around and you see miracles everywhere, that's a good Chanukah. That means that I've worked on myself to see the beautiful Pach Shemens of life that are all around me all the time. But the Rambam then goes on, and this is the part I want to focus on. He says, look at the underlying line in number 1. Afilu ein lo ma yochal ela min tzedakah. Let's say a person is impoverished. Person has no money, and literally they're supported by charity. So what's the halacha? Shoel o mocher kisuso v'lokeach shemen v'neros umadlik. So even if you have no money, the Rambam says, and you're supported by charity, nevertheless, you should go ahead and borrow money. Mocher kisuso. Mocher kisuso means sell your clothing. Sell your clothing. Right? So borrow money, sell your clothing in order to go ahead and purchase oil or purchase candles for Ner Chanukah. So I just want to point out, this is not like a metaphorical statement. The Rambam is a book of halacha. So the Rambam is telling me a halacha that I have to make sure to kindle Neros Chanukah no matter what. And even if it literally means selling the shirt off my back, even if it literally means going ahead and borrowing money, I am obligated to go to that extent to fulfill the mitzvah of Ner Chanukah. Now, this is incredibly dramatic and unique. Why is it dramatic and unique? Number one, what kind of mitzvah is Ner Chanukah? It's a drabanan. It's a rabbinic mitzvah. Never, ever do we find that there is such an obligation to go to such an extent for a rabbinic mitzvah. Not only that, we don't even have an obligation to go to such an extent for biblical mitzvahs. If you take a look at number 2, the Shulchan Aruch writes, jumping a little bit to Sukkis, the Ramal writes, Umisha ein lo esrog, Oshar mitzvah overes, ein tzarich levazvez aleh hon rav. Shulchan Aruch says, if you don't have an esrog, you don't have to spend all of your money getting an esrog. You don't have to spend an exorbitant amount of money getting an esrog. Again, a Jew is obligated to live in the world of reality. So I have to try to get an esrog. I have to try to get a nice esrog. But if it's an exorbitant amount of money, I'm not obligated to go out and start borrowing money. I'm certainly not obligated to sell the clothing off my back to be able to purchase an esrog. Not only that, but the Shulchan Aruch writes, Kimosha Amru, Hamevazvez al yevazvez yoser michomesh. Remember again, the halacha is, this is part of the mitzvah, halacha of mitzvah tzedakah. We are obviously supposed to be charitable and incredibly generous individuals. However, there is a cap on the maximum amount of tzedakah that a person is permitted to give. Person is never permitted to give away more than 1/5, 20% of their wealth. For one simple reason. Chazal did not want us to impoverish ourselves in the pursuit of becoming charitable people. Again, that's counterintuitive. If by being so charitable, I impoverish myself, I'm creating more problems than I am fixing. So you see, the Shulchan Aruch says that there's a spending cap. If you can't find an esrog, you don't have to spend all your money. And even in general, spending money on mitzvos, never more than 20%, never more than 1/5. And yet, when it comes to Ner Chanukah, the Rambam says explicitly, do whatever you have to do. You're supported by charity, borrow more money. You can't borrow money, sell off whatever meager possessions you may have. Do whatever you have to do in order to fulfill the mitzvah of Ner Chanukah. And the question becomes, how do we understand this? Why? What is so special about Ner Chanukah that requires us to go to these extremes? So if you take a look at number 3, so the Magid Mishnah writes, we're not going to go through this, like a lot of lumdas, like a lot of deep intellectual halachic conversations over here, which is not our topic for tonight, but I will just show you something interesting. If you're looking at the underlined line in the Magid Mishnah is a commentary on the Rambam. He writes, Vatam mishum persume nisa. The reason that I have to go to such an extent for the mitzvah of Ner Chanukah is because of persume nisa. Persume nisa means publicizing a miracle. You see, Chanukah has 2 parts to it, right? There's the private Chanukah and there is the public Chanukah, right? Remember again, we're not used to this in the diaspora because diaspora Chanukah has fundamentally changed over the generations. But if you've ever been in Eretz Yisrael for Chanukah, you know again, in most places, they're lighting outdoors. Right, the mitzvah of Ner Chanukah is actually again outdoors. The real, which is interesting because it sounds so antithetical to those of us who have grown up in the diaspora. Because remember, if your menorah is outside, everyone gets to see it except who? Except you, right? So it's interesting. You're out there, you're going to sing your Haneros, Halalu, your Mos, or you stand there for a few minutes and you go inside to eat dinner. You know, so it's fascinating. It's fascinating, which is totally different than the way we observe Chanukah here in the diaspora. But in its essence, even in diaspora, where primarily our lighting is done for the inside, we nevertheless try to position our menorah in a way that publicizes the miracle. The Magid Mishnah posits that any mitzvah that has a public display has an additional component of Kiddush Hashem, has an additional component of sanctification of God's name. I think I mentioned this last year. You know, whenever we think about Kiddush Hashem, we always think about what? Dying, right? Dying al Kiddush Hashem. You know, Rabbi Soloveitchik Zechat Tzaddik Livracha said, dying al Kiddush Hashem is easy because you only have to do it once. Living al Kiddush Hashem is much more complicated because that becomes a day-to-day struggle. So the Magid Mishnah explains any mitzvah that has an element of publicity to it also has an element of Kiddush Hashem, sanctification of God's name. And because we're now dealing not just with a mitzvah, but with Kiddush Hashem, sanctifying God's name, therefore you have to do whatever is within your power to fulfill this particular mitzvah. Just as an aside, by the way, a little bit of interesting information, there is one other rabbinic mitzvah where the Rambam says that you have to go out and borrow from tzedakah or sell the shirt off your back to fulfill it. Which mitzvah is it? Daled kosos, the mitzvah of 4 cups of wine at the Seder, which is also rabbinic. But again, the common denominator between Ner Chanukah and Daled kosos is Daled kosos, the 4 cups, is also an element of Pirsumei Nisa, publicizing the miracle. We're publicizing our freedom. In this case, I'm publicizing it to everyone else who's at my Seder table. But there's a publicity element. And what the Rambam teaches us is that wherever there's a publicity element, that is a fulfillment of Kiddush Hashem, sanctification of God's name. And whenever you have an opportunity to sanctify God's name, I have to do whatever is within my power to make that happen. Okay, an interesting technical idea. But let's perhaps explore a little bit more from a hashkafic perspective what the halacha is trying to convey to us. So I'll show you something amazing. Take a look at number 4. So the Gemara Masechah Shabbos says as follows. The Gemara says, Zos omeres, ner Chanukah, mitzvah lahanicha besoch asara. Quite a fascinating Gemara. The mitzvah of ner Chanukah, the mitzvah is to go ahead and to place it within 10 tfachim. So just to appreciate what this means, let's, for argument's sake, let's call a tefach 3 inches. Tefach is 3 inches. So the Gemara says, when placing the menorah, one should really place the menorah within 3 feet of the ground. So you're really placing your... Now, again, remember, the Gemara here is talking about what they do in Eretz Yisrael. So we're lighting it outdoors. When you light it outdoors by the doorway, you should put it within 3 feet of the ground. Very low. What we call lamata miyud. Less than 10 tfachim. Okay. So why? Why do I have to put it less than 10 tfachim? So the Rosh, Rabbeinu Asher, who was one of the earliest codifiers of halacha, writes as follows. He explains, because here's the problem. If you go ahead and you place a menorah outside of your home, what could it possibly look like? What could it look like? Why are you placing a menorah outside of your home? For light, for illumination purposes. And of course, again, remember, Ner Chanukah is a Ner mitzvah. It is a mitzvah light. Therefore, again, we don't use it for any mundane purposes. So the Rosh says what we do is we purposely put it low down to the ground. So this way, again, it's not really a useful light for illumination, right? If something is going to be useful for light during the nighttime, it has to be positioned a little bit higher. We purposely put it low, so no one should think that this is a light of illumination. It's not a utilitarian light. Rather, again, it is simply a light of a mitzvah. But watch this. Take a look at number 6. The Gemara Masechah Sukkah says something amazing. The Gemara Masechah Sukkah says, Tanya, Rabbi Yossi Omer, Me'olam lo yarda shchina lemata, v'lo alu Moshe ve'Eliyahu lemaro. Shene'emar, Hashamayim shamayim la'Hashem, v'ya'aretz nasan livnei adam. The Gemara says, the shchina, the divine presence, never comes down to this world. Never comes down to this world, nor can any mortal ever ascend to the celestial sphere. So the Shamayim, the heavens, those belong to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Man doesn't enter there. V'ya'aretz nasan livnei adam. The earth belongs to man. HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't enter the earth. Doesn't come down to the earth. So the Gemara says, really? The Shechina never came down to the earth? V'aksiv vayeret Hashem al Har Sinai. The pasuk says Hashem came down on Har Sinai. Not only that, by the way, but remember again in the Beis HaMikdash. Was the Shechina present in the Beis HaMikdash? Absolutely. Where? Between the Kruvim. Remember again, on the lid of the ark, on the lid of the Aron, there are 2 cherub-like figures. As Machlokes, was it the image of 2 little boys, a little boy and a little girl? 2 cherub-like figures, and the Shechina resided right in between those 2 figures. So what do you mean the Shechina never came down to the world? To which the Gemara says, Lemala me'asara tfachim. Watch this. The Shechina, the divine presence, comes down to the world. But the divine presence never dips below 10 tfachim. So the Shechina will come down, but never less than 10 tfachim. So that's why when the Gemara says the Shechina never came down to the world, it means the Shechina, whatever this means, never comes down to the ground. Never comes down to the ground. The Shechina will hover. Right? The lowest it'll come down is it'll hover at 10 tfachim, absolutely no lower. Very intriguing. So we have the Shechina never going below 10 tfachim. One more Gemara, then we're going to tie it together. Look at number 7. Gemara Maseches Brachos. Amrav Hamnuna. Mai dichsiv. Mi ka'achacham u'mi yodeh pesha davar. What is the meaning of the pasuk? And the pasuk says, who is wise? Who is wise like God? And who knows how to make pshara? Right, a compromise. Mika Kadosh Baruch Hu sheyodeh lasos pshara ben shnei tzadikim. Who is like Hashem, who knows how to create a compromise, conflict resolution between 2 righteous people. Who are the 2 righteous people? Bein Chizkiyo li Yeshayo. Between Chizkiyo and Yeshayo. Chizkiyo and Yeshayo had a falling out. Right? They had a falling out. Chizkiyo was the king. Again, a tie-in to Sefer Tehillim. He's Dovid HaMelech's great-great-grandson. So, right, Chizkiyo is the king Melech Yehuda, and Yeshayo is the prophet. They did not get along. Sometimes even great people don't get along with other people. They did not get along. So remember again, just to give you a little bit of background. So why didn't they get along? Chizkiyo Amar, Leis Yeshayo Gabai, Dachi Ashkechan Be'elio Da'azla Gabai Achov. Yeshayo Amar, Leisi Chizkiyo Gabai, Dachi Ashkechan Be'yahora Ben Achov Da'azla Gabai Elisha. So this is incredible. Why didn't they get along? 9 out of 10 times, why don't people get along? Why don't people get along? Ego. Excellent. Whoever said it, right? Was that Mrs. Pollock, right? Ego, right? Ego. At the end of the day, ego. Ego gets in the way of, you see, it's never about ego. It's always about principles, right? Just like it's never the money, it's the principle. It's always the money, right? And it's never the principle. It's always the ego. And the truth is, great people have egos also. Everyone has ego. By the way, I want to point out, we often speak about ego like ego is a bad word. Ego is very important. A healthy sense of self, healthy ego is good. Inflated ego is when you get yourself into trouble. So listen to what's happening over here. Yeshayahu says, I'm the prophet. The king should come to me. Chizkiyahu says, I'm the king. The prophet should come to me. Now just so you understand who we're talking about over here. We're talking about Yeshayahu. Yeshayahu, one of the greatest prophets of all time. Chizkiyahu, who is Chizkiyahu? The Gemara says Chizkiyahu could have been the Mashiach. He could have been the Mashiach. Remember again, the Gemara says, during times of Chizkiyahu, every man, woman, and child knew all of the halachos of Tum and Tara, knew all of the halachos of ritual purity and impurity, which are some of the hardest and most intricate halachos in our entire system of law, of our legal system. During the times of Chizkiyahu was a tzaddik. Yeshayahu was a tzaddik. Remember again, what happens to Chizkiyahu? Why does the Chizkiyahu become Mashiach? Why not? He refused to marry. Why did he refuse to marry? Because he saw prophetically that if he were to marry and have a son, his son would be a rasha. His son would be wicked. And so he made the conscious decision to refrain from getting married in order not to bring a wicked child, a wicked son into this world. So that story is important. What happens? So remember again, so now you have Yeshayahu and Chizkiyahu locked in this clash of egos. Chizkiyahu, I'm the king, the prophet should come to me. Yeshayahu, I'm the prophet, the king should come to me. What does HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the great pshara maker, right, the great compromise effector, what did he do? So, Ma'as HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hevi Yisurim al Chizkiyahu, V'amr lo li Yeshayahu, Lech u'bekaras achol. Shne'emar, Bayomim ahem chalach Chizkiyahu lamos, Vayavo elav Yeshayahu ben Amos hanavi, Vayomer elav kamar. So listen to this. So what does HaKadosh Baruch Hu do? HaKadosh Baruch Hu made Chizkiyahu sick, and he told Yeshayahu, now you have a mitzvah of what? Bigger cholim. You see, the amazing part about the Jewish people is that even when we hate each other, right? If HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells me to do something, I'm going to do it, right? I'm not going to disobey HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So, which also is just such a fascinating idea. You see, Yeshayahu is willing to go to Chizkiyahu. He's willing to go to Chizkiyahu because now Chizkiyahu is a chola. He's sick. So because he's sick, now he's like an object of a mitzvah. I'll go to perform the mitzvah of Bikur Cholim. I just want to tell you something amazing. You see from here just so many lessons in all of these ideas. The Ribono Shel Olam is the master of conflict resolution. Why? This is very important to know because everyone engages in conflict resolution in one way or another. How do you affect proper conflict resolution? No one could be made to feel like they've lost. The moment that one party feels that they've lost, they walk away aggrieved. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu could have said, Yeshayahu, come on, get it together. What are you doing? You're the prophet. Or he could have said, Chizkiyahu, get it together. Instead, what does he do? He allows everyone to save face. Chizkiyahu gets sick, he can't come, he's sick. Yeshayahu now has a mitzvah of Bikur Cholim. It's not that I'm giving in to Chizkiyahu, I'm performing a mitzvah. Often when you're trying to affect conflict resolution, if you address it or if you approach it as there's going to be a winner, there's going to be a loser, you usually have two losers. But if you try to make everyone a winner and try to allow everyone to emerge from the conflict with their head held high, their sense of dignity and ego intact, you really have an opportunity to affect real shalom. By the way, this is one more aside on the tangent, which is also, by the way, one of the most important concepts that often adults miss, which is, in life, it is so much more important to be happy than it is to be right. As adults, we blow this all the time. Right? Children, amazingly enough, know this. Right? Children understand this. Right? It's Mashal, I once heard about this was, a child could have a complete meltdown about anything. Right? Anything. What happens? Give the child a piece of chocolate or an ice cream cone, and what happens? Mamish, like Mashiach came. Everything is wonderful. Life is fantastic. Because children care much more about being happy than being right. Adults often fall into the trap, I am right. Especially, by the way, if I was wronged by someone, to recreate a relationship or to make overtures or to try to make shalom. No, I'm right. That person was wrong. Do you know how many miserable people walk around this world? They're right. They're right. They're always right. But they're just miserable. They're steeped in a constant state of misery because they've chosen to put being right over above being happy. We all do it. Some of us do it in very severe ways that really complicates our happiness in some significant ways. If we only found the courage to not have to be right, to be self-assured enough to know, I don't have to be right. It's more important to be happy, which is incredible because what Kadosh Baruch Hu is doing over here is he's just saying, Chizkiyo, Yishayo, at the end of the day, I don't want either of you to feel like you lost. And therefore, again, what we're going to do is, Chizkiyo, you're going to get sick. Yeshayahu, come to do Bikur Cholim. By the way, the context of this, just one more piece, just the context, and then we'll move on. The context of this is, why did Chizkiyo get sick? His getting sick was a punishment for his refusal to get married. He refused to get married. He's punished for that decision. So remember, I've quoted this Gemara in the context of Sefer Tehillim in past years. So remember again, the rest of the Gemara, I didn't include it on the sheet, but the rest of the Gemara is, Yeshayahu shows up to Chizkiyahu, and he says, Chizkiyahu, you're going to die. Now, not the best Bikur Cholim etiquette, right? You're going to die. And Chizkiyahu says, why? Yeshayahu says, because you refused to marry. You refused. So Chizkiyahu says, 1 second, you know why I refused to marry? Because I saw that I'm going to have a son who's going to be a terrible Rasha. To which Yeshayahu responds, B'hadik havshei dirachman alamalach. Don't get involved in God's plans. That's not for you to decide. Your job is to find a wife, to try to have a family, and that's it. What happens after that is up to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So Chizkiyahu says to Yeshayahu, fine, you have a single daughter. Could I marry your daughter? So Yeshayahu says, I already told you you're going to die. There's no point in that. So here's amazing, and here's our Sefer Tehillim tie-in. Chizkiyahu says, I have a Masorah from my Alter Zayda. I have a Masorah. I have a tradition from my great-grandfather, Dovid HaMelech. Afilu cherev chada munachas al tzavaro shel adam. Even if there is a sharp sword resting against the neck of a person, al yimana atzmo mirachamim. Do not stop asking HaKadosh Baruch Hu for compassion. In other words, it's not over till it's over. I might be sick, but I'm not dead yet. And where there's breath, where there's life, ultimately there's hope. Sure enough, what happened? So it's amazing. Yeshayahu was swayed. Chizkiyahu married Yeshayahu's daughter. Chizkiyahu was healed. And they have a son. Their son was named Menashe. Menashe was the longest reigning monarch. He reigned for 55 years. For 33 of those years, he was a terrible, terrible Rasha. He tried to become a Baal Tshuva. He did become a Baal Tshuva for the last 22 years of his reign. But he had broken so many things in the kingdom of Am Yisrael that he was unable to go ahead and take it back. Okay, but why am I sharing this Gemara with you? Because what's interesting about this story over here is, how does HaKadosh Baruch Hu bring Chizkiyahu and Yeshayahu together? How does he bring them together? Through illness. Because you see, even when two people are locked in debate, or they're locked in machlokas, if one party becomes ill, the other party becomes compassionate, right? So I might have gotten into a fight with Ruvain, but if Ruvain becomes ill, I'm not going to continue the machlokes, right? I'm going to go to Ruvain. It's Biker Cholim. There's a mitzvah. I'm going to go to the person who is ill. Yeshayahu does not have fond feelings for Chizkiyahu, but Chizkiyahu becomes sick, and therefore again Yeshayahu goes to visit. The Maharal writes something amazing in number 8. He says this Gemara has a major national implication, and the Gemara says, Maharal says in number 8 in Netzach Yisrael, Cholim Vidovim b'chol yom u'biyisureihem kibnei Yisrael b'galos hamarazeh. Who is as sick as Klal Yisrael? Now, that doesn't sound right, but you'll see what he means in just a moment. Right? Who is as compromised? Who is as ill as Am Yisrael? Everything we've gone through, everything we've lived through, the galus, and remember again, so many times, when we speak about galus, we can't even relate to what galus really was. Because the galus that we live in now is a galus of beracha. It is a galus of blessing. But for thousands of years, for over 2,000 years, Klal Yisrael endured challenge after challenge, adversity after adversity, sickness after sickness. V'im kein, hagam shemitzad midas derech eretz. Ra'oi le'ish ha'pashut shi'elech etzel melech ram v'nisa. Kedei lefaiso ulevakesh eslichaso. So listen to what the Maharal says. The truth is, we all do things wrong. We all do things wrong. Right? And this is incredibly important to acknowledge. Like Shlomo HaMelech writes, In tzadik ba'aretz asher lo yechta. There is no, even the most righteous of people sin. Everyone sins. So let's play this out for just a moment. What happens after I commit an avera? So what's the proper procedure? What should happen? What should happen? Right? Tshuva. Right? I should go ahead and approach HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In other words, I wronged God. I wronged myself as well. So the process of tshuva says, I need to engage HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Right? In other words, ani ledodi v'dodi li. I need to engage. I need to engage. I did something wrong. It's no different than any other human relationship. You hurt someone, you wronged someone. The obligation of engagement is upon the aggressor, upon the perpetrator. You hurt someone, you have the obligation to engage. I commit an avera, I have an obligation to engage the Ribono Shel Olam. That's the Midas Derech Eretz, right? When the servant offends the king, the servant goes and petitions the king for mercy, for forgiveness. Look what the Maharal writes. Mikol makom, kevan shenu bebechinas cholim. But sometimes we're ill. Sometimes we're ill. You see, the difficult thing in life is that sometimes we make such dramatic mistakes that we compromise our own ability to affect change, to affect tshuva. Sometimes I mess up so badly that I'm not even sure exactly how to make my way back. The Maharal uses the metaphor of sickness. There are different forms of illness. Sometimes a person could be ill, but I could go about my activities of daily living. And sometimes I'm so ill that I'm bedbound and I literally can't do anything for myself. The same is true in spiritual illness. There are times when I make mistakes and I got it. I know what I did wrong and I know how to fix it. I know what I have to do. And then there are times in life when I have messed up so badly that I don't even know where to start. I don't know how to go ahead and even engage the king. I don't know how to talk to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I don't even know how to say I'm sorry. I don't know. And by the way, you see this in human relationships all the time as well. One person hurts another person, and sometimes I hurt someone, and I realize I really hurt that person. I really hurt that person. And sometimes what people do is they're so overwhelmed by the hurt that they visited upon another human being that what do they do? What do they do? Nothing. Which sounds totally counterintuitive because you would think, well, if I know that I hurt someone and it's clear, again, sometimes you hurt someone, but they deserved it or they contributed. Sometimes I know I hurt someone. So you think if it's clear that you visited, hurt upon someone, of course you engage. Sometimes I'm so overwhelmed by the damage I have caused that I don't even know how to engage. You see, now in human relationships, this often compounds the hurt, because then the victim, right, the aggrieved party, feels that the perpetrator doesn't understand what they did, or is not acknowledging, or is not owning it, because if they would apologize. Sometimes what we don't realize is that the perpetrator realizes how badly they've messed up, and they're stunted, they're stuck, they're handicapped, they don't know what to do, how to move on, how to apologize. What do I say when I've wronged someone so badly? And the same with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. There are times in life that I mess up so badly. And by the way, sometimes it's not just one mess up. Sometimes I look back at my life and I realize that for years, I've been messing up. And for years, I've been misfiring. And for years, it's the wrong direction. And I don't even know what to say to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I don't even know what to say. I don't know what to say because the truth is, I'm embarrassed to say anything. How many times can you say, I'm sorry, for the same thing, and that sorry still have any meaning? How many promises, I'm not going to do it again, could you make, and keep on doing it again, and those words have any meaning? And so sometimes, writes the Maharal, I'm so ill, I'm so sick, I'm so compromised, that I know I should go to the king. I know that's what should happen, but I can't. So what happens in those moments, says the Maharal? This is what the Maharal writes. He says, Mikol Mokom, Kevan Shanu bebechinas cholim, Alkin Yavo HaMelech levakrenu. Listen to how beautiful this is. So what does the king do when he sees that we're sick? What does he do? He comes to us. The same way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu made the pshara, made the compromise between Chizkiyahu and Yeshayahu. He makes Chizkiyahu sick, so Yeshayahu got to come. Says the Maharal, sons of HaKadosh Baruch Hu sees that I am just too ill, that I'm just too compromised, that I'm not going towards him. He comes to me. Isn't it absolutely astounding? The incredible love that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has for us. That I messed up. I know I messed up. And I know I even know on some level what I need to re-engage. But sometimes I'm paralyzed by my mistakes. Sometimes I can't move. I just can't do it. I'm like bedbound. I can't do it. I'm the chola. In those moments of the chola, in those moments, the king comes to the ill patient. The king comes to the chola. So isn't this amazing? Says the Maharal. That's the metaphor of the Gemara. You know, there's a beautiful story that Shlomo Carlebach told the story. He had a beautiful nigun. I'm not going to sing it for you. Of Melech Rachamon. Right? Melech Rachamon, compassionate king, Rachim Alinu, Tovu Meitiv, who is good and bestows good. He Daresh Lanu. Seek us out. Shuva Eleinu. Come back to us. And Rabbi Shlomo composed the beautiful nigun. So they asked him, where did the nigun come from? So he said one time he was traveling in an airport, and he saw a teenager, a young man, with a very disheveled look. And he was on a payphone. Does everyone know what a payphone is? Okay, good. You're getting some blank stares from some of the millennials here, right? Right. So they used to have it. You put in a quarter, good. Right. He saw this young man, disheveled look on a payphone. And the young man just starts sobbing. And he was able to discern that the young man had run away from home. He was on the phone with his parents. And he just said, I want to come home. And the parents asked him, okay, where are you? And the kid says, I don't know where I am. But you just have to come and get me. He says, that's what we say in davening on Yom Tiv. Melech Rachamon, compassionate king. Tovu Meitiv Hidaresh Lanu. Seek us out. What a chutzpah. I'm asking God to seek me out? I should seek God out. You're right. I should seek God out. But there are just times in life where I'm done. I'm just done. I can't move forward anymore. I'm overwhelmed. I'm broken. I'm ill. As many words as you want, as many adjectives you want to put in there. And in those moments, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, it's okay. I'm going to come for you. I'll come for you. If you're too ill, if you're too broken, if you're too overwhelmed to come to me, I will come to you. And says the sons of something absolutely amazing. Take a look at number 9. This is actually quite beautiful. So what happens? So the sons of said, let's go back for just a moment. Remember again, the Shechina only got right, and the Shechina comes down to earth. it only remains at what? At what? 10 tfachim. Never dips below 10. Yet, interestingly enough, where do you put your Ner Chanukah? Where do you put your Ner Chanukah? Lamata miyud. Beneath 10 tfachim. If you take a look at number 9, the Be'er HaChaim quotes from the Sanz Rav in the left-hand paragraph. Rabbi Chaim is Sanz, the Divrei Chaim says, Tahani mili b'chala ba'adim v'azmanim. So he explains over here that something interestingly enough, there's a difference between Shabbos and Yom Tiv, right? Shabbos, HaKadosh Baruch Hu invites us to be with Him. Right? Shabbos is an experience of going to Hashem. Right? Ultimately, again, Yom Tiv is an experience. Sanzarav says that Klal Yisrael invites HaKadosh Baruch Hu to us. So Shabbos, we go to Hashem. Yom Tiv, Hashem comes to us. The Sanzarav says there's one more experience. That additional dynamic is Chanukah. What happens in Chanukah? Aval nosef aleya mimei Chanukah, she'HaKadosh Baruch Hu mevaker es banav ahuvav b'soch beis ha'asurim shalahem. Do you know what Ner Chanukah is? Ner Chanukah is I create light. And where am I creating light? Pretty close to the ground. Because, says the Divrei Chaim, what Chanukah highlights is the following dynamic, that sometimes my light is not shining forth. That sometimes my light is not shining on high. Sometimes I'm in a compromised state in life, and my light only shines very low to the ground. That's where I'm holding right now in life. I'm lamata miyud. I feel down and out. I feel like I'm not the best version of myself. I feel compromised, and I don't even know what to do or how to pull myself out of it. And I light my Ner Chanukah, lamata miyud. Says the Divrei Chaim, the Shechina never comes below 10 tfachim, except when it does. And when does it? The 8 days of Chanukah. Chanukah is the only time of the year where the Shechina comes down beneath 10 tfachim. Chanukah is the only time of year where the Shechina says to us, I'll come get you. Wherever you are, it's okay. It's okay. HaKadosh Baruch Hu understands our challenges more than we understand our challenges. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu understands our handicaps more than we understand our handicaps. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says it's almost as if, just kind of like Ner Chanukah is almost like the spiritual flare. Throw up your flare. Show me where you are. Just show me where you are, and I will come and get you. No matter how low you might be. I never go below 10 tfachim, the Shechina says. But for a Jew who is broken, for a Jew who needs me, for a Jew who needs a helping hand, I'll come lamata miyud. Says the Divrei Chaim. This is the power of Chanukah. Chanukah is the Yom Tiv that reminds us that no matter how much I have fallen, no matter how much I have compromised myself, no matter how many wrong turns, bad decisions, or mistakes I have made in life, no one is beyond salvation. No one is beyond repair. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu never gives up on us. And even if I am all the way down at the ground, literally my menorah, my light, I can kindle a little bit of light, but it's mamish, it's a couple of feet off the ground, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, no problem. I'll come get you. I'll come get you. Says the Sanzer of HaKadosh Baruch Hu comes out, look at his words. HaKadosh Baruch Hu mevaker es banav ahuvav b'soch beis ha'asurim shalahem. HaKadosh Baruch Hu comes to get me out, to spring me from my jail. Which jail is that referring to? It's often the prison of our own creation. Because many of us live in a prison, right? We live in a prison of our mistakes. We live in a prison of our failures. We live in a prison of low self-esteem. We live in a prison of low self-worth. We live in a prison where we don't believe in ourselves. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, just kindle the light. Just kindle the light. And I'll come lamata miyud. And I'll get you, bless you, and I'll get you wherever you are. And now we begin to understand. See, let's go back for just a moment. What did we speak about 40 minutes ago? Right? Remember again, I won't test you, right? But what did we speak about 40 minutes ago? The Rambam says that what do you have to do in order to light Ner Chanukah? What do you have to do? Whatever it takes. Whatever it takes, what you have to do. You need to sell your clothing, sell your clothing. You need to go ahead and sell the shirt off your back, sell the shirt off your back. You need to go ahead and borrow money, borrow money. Why? Because this hashkafa of Ner Chanukah, this mindset of Ner Chanukah is so incredibly important, because think about this. What more important lesson is there in Yiddishkeit than the knowledge that no matter how far I fall, my God will always come for me? That even though, again, I should seek Him out, and even though I should find Him, and I should get myself together, and I should make the journey to Him, in times in life when I can't do that, my Ribono Shel Olam will come to find me. That same Ribono Shel Olam who made a rule that He never goes L'matza Miyud, He never goes beneath 10 Tfachim. Remember, even the lid of the ark, the lid of the Aron, upon which the Shekhinah was perched, that lid is above 10 Tfachim. The Shekhinah never comes down beneath 10 Tfachim, except when I need Him to. If I need Him to come to me, because like the Maharal said, I'm a chola. If I need Him to come to me because for whatever the reason, I just can't make the journey to Him, He comes. Chanukah, the Ner Chanukah, is L'mata Miyud. Just throw up the flare. Just do something that HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows, because I have to tell HaKadosh Baruch Hu that I want Him. I have to indicate somehow that I want Him to come and find me. That's the Ner Chanukah L'mata Miyud. Throw up the flare, and the Ribono Shel Olam comes to get us wherever we are. And says the Rambam, this hashkafa, this outlook, this mindset, this theological truth is such a foundation stone that you must light Ner Chanukah. So whatever you have to do, whatever you have to sell, whatever you have to pawn, right, whatever you have to borrow, right, you have to light Ner Chanukah. Because a Jew always has to know that no matter how far I fall, even if it's L'mata Miyud, the Shekhinah is always willing to come for me. And the truth is, with this I'll conclude, what's interesting to note is just to tie into the Parsha, so you know that the Chanukah always falls out, right, with the Parshios of Yosef. It's always the way that it is. So again, sometimes it varies a little bit. It could be Vayeshev, Vayigash, Miketz, right? But again, so like this year it's going to be, right, this is not Shabbos Chanukah, so it's going to be Miketz, right, Emirat Hashem. But it's always a story of Yosef. Always a story of Yosef. If you think about it for a moment, what's the essence of the story of Yosef? What is, and Yosef's story is one of the most tragic stories in all of Tanakh. What's Yosef's story? Take a look at number 10. V'Yosef hurad Mitzrayma, vayikneu Potifar svisparo Sarah tabachim ish Mitzri, miyada Yishmaelim. You know what? This is the first time in the Torah that we ever find something dramatic recorded, which is a human being sold. Never before did we ever find the story of a human being sold like a piece of property. You see, what happened to Yosef was stripped not only of his clothing, right? We all know when he comes to the brothers, so the brothers take his clothing, not just his coat, they remove all of his clothing, they strip him of his clothing. But the clothing was the least of it. They stripped him of his dignity. They stripped him of his identity. They stripped him of his sense of self, to the point that Yosef is sold by the brothers to the caravan as an object. And he's sold to Potiphar as an object. And we're familiar with the story. He has to, the wife of Potiphar is constantly trying to seduce him. And in number 11, what happens? He's constantly trying to repel her overtures. And finally, again, one day she gets aggressive with him. She grabbed his clothing. She says to him, sleep with me. So what does Yosef do? He kind of just gets out of his clothing, and he leaves the article of clothing in her hand. So it's interesting. What is clothing? Clothing creates for us a sense of identity. Yosef is constantly being robbed of his identity. Brothers take his identity. Potiphar takes his identity. Ashes Potiphar takes his identity. Everyone tries to make Yosef into an object. And do you know what the greatest accomplishment of Yosef was? That despite it all, he never lost his sense of self. Yosef HaTzadik somehow was able to retain and to hold on to some semblance of identity, some semblance of self, despite all of the overwhelming hardship that he underwent. See, what Yosef teaches us is that life could subject you to a lot of different things. But life can't rob you of your identity. Life cannot rob you of your sense of self. You can give away your sense of self. You can abdicate your sense of self. You can give up on your sense of self, but no one could take that from you. That's ultimately the story of Yosef. And this is the connection between Yosef and Chanukah. Because at the end of the day, why does the Shekhinah come down lamata miyud? Right, when I kindle my Ner Chanukah within 3 weeks, why does the Shekhinah come down? Because often in life, even when we see no good in ourselves, HaKadosh Baruch Hu always sees the little cruse of oil. HaKadosh Baruch Hu always sees the little bit of holiness. HaKadosh Baruch Hu always sees the little bit of good that is inside each of us. It may be buried underneath layers and layers of schmutz, but there's good inside each of us. I often can't see it. I can't see it. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu always sees it. When the world looked at Yosef, the brothers saw an object. Potiphar saw an object. Eshes Potiphar saw an object. The world saw one thing. But Yosef somehow was able to retain some sense of self. Chanukah is even though we give up on ourselves. Often, I'm not even like Yosef. I can't see my sense of self. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Ribono Shel Olam, is able to see the good in me, even if I've given up on myself a long time ago. And as long as I'm willing to light that candle, as long as I'm willing to send up that divine flare, the true miracle of Chanukah is that the Shekhinah is willing to go down lamata miyud beneath 10 tefachim, pick me up, lift me up, dust me off, help me rededicate myself and my life, and start again. This is Chanukah. So we see this is why the Rambam was so incredibly insistent that no matter what you have to do, make sure to light those candles. We should be Zochem Yirtzeh Hashem. You know, as we mentioned before, Chanukah is a challenging Yom Tov because the requirements and obligations of day-to-day living don't cease. But we know what our avoda is in Ner Chanukah. Our avoda of a Chanukah, number one, the Rambam told us to cultivate the sense of gratitude. Through the miracle of the menorah, through the miracle of the Pach Shemen, to take stock every day, work on, go wherever you do. Some people have a gratitude journal, other people could, whatever you need to do to go ahead and acknowledge the miracles in your everyday life. Use the Pach Shemen as a springboard for the miracles of everyday life. But in addition to that, if you are a person who has given up on yourself, and many of us are, we don't even realize we've given up on ourselves, but often we stop trying. We just stop trying. We stop pushing. We stop advancing. We stop trying to repair broken relationships, right? And that's broken relationships with other people, broken relationships with ourselves, broken relationships with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We just stop trying. Because often we've thrown in the towel on ourselves. Chanukah is the time where even if you don't have the confidence to lift yourself up, hold out your arms to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Say, Ribono Shel Olam. It's a struggle. It's really a struggle. There are things in life that are overwhelmingly difficult. And maybe I could do it on my own, but I feel like I can't do it on my own. But I'm going to throw out my flare. I'm going to light my Ner Chanukah. And I have one request, one Chanukah present from the Ribono Shel Olam. It's the best Chanukah present in the world. The best Chanukah present is that the Shekhinah will come down lamata miyud for you. And he'll come down each and every night, pulling you up a little bit higher, a little bit closer to him, allowing you to feel a little bit better about yourself. We should be Zochem Yirtzeh Hashem to feel the Shekhinah pull us heavenward. The Shekhinah should come down lamata miyud, but pull us above yud. And we should be Zochem Yirtzeh Hashem to emerge from Chanukah with a renewed sense of self, a renewed sense of confidence, a renewed vigor to live more meaningful and impactful lives, a renewed commitment to repairing broken relationships. You don't have to make them great, but sometimes you could take away the animosity and the negativity. That's what a relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu does. A strong relationship with Hashem allows me to manage the rest of my difficult life relationships. We should be Zochem Yirtzeh Hashem to experience this over the course of Chanukah. And however, we should be Zochem that before we get to the last night of Chanukah, we should be Zochem Yirtzeh Hashem to transition from kindling the 8-branched menorah in our homes to Yirtzeh Hashem kindling the 7-branch menorah in the Beis HaMikdash Mihira B'Yameinu. Amen. just a scheduling announcement. There is no shiur for the next 2 weeks. So Amirat Hashem, I believe we pick up again on December 15th. Sound right? I think 14th. December 14th, Amirat Hashem is our next shiur. Wishing everyone a Freilich Chanukah.